Welcome to Innovating Education, the podcast where we explore groundbreaking ideas and practices reshaping how we learn, teach, and lead. I'm your host, Dr. Riley Williams, and today we are honored to have an exceptional guest, Dr. Jody Miller, with us. Dr. Miller is the director of Coral Reef Academy in the U.S. Virgin Islands. She's dedicated over 2 decades to revolutionizing special education leadership. Her career has been defined by a steadfast commitment to fostering access to transformative educational services for students with unique needs. With a strategic focus on operational excellence and program expansion, Dr. Miller has led multiple teams through the launching of innovative programs tailored to the specific challenges faced by diverse communities. Her expertise in educational leadership, communication, and child development has helped countless students achieve their fullest potential. Today, we'll explore Dr. Miller's inspiring journey, her actionable insights for educators, and her vision for the future of inclusive education. Whether you're an educator, a school leader, or simply passionate about empowering students, this episode is sure to leave you inspired. Dr. Miller, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for that introduction.
Well, your career has been defined by a mission to empower students with unique needs and support educators who work with them. Do you mind taking us through your journey and what inspired you to focus on behavioral strategies in inclusive education?
Sure. So I started out teaching, and I think, I have always had a love of children, interacting, hanging out. I have many, many, many cousins. So I grew up with kids and caring for them. And so when I graduated college, I knew I wanted to teach. I wasn't, I didn't know at that time that I wanted to teach in special education. And so a position opened up in a boarding school in Middle Tennessee for kids with disabilities and adults with disabilities. And so I applied and where I started my career. So I started teaching. I taught for about 3 years and then went into the administrative part. And mostly because at that time, the school I was working at, we opened another school for kids specifically with autism. And so I started directing that school. And within that sort of time that I was there, I knew that I needed to, have some education in terms of the behavioral responses and taking care of kids behaviorally because that's the students that we were serving. And so I moved to California. I born and raised in Tennessee and moved to California and started to work in applied behavior analysis. And I became a BCBA. The ABA field did not fit me exactly. I really loved schools. And so I went back I spent 3 or 4 years in ABA and then I went back into the school setting, working with kids with various disabilities and working in a non public school, but serving the public sector. I spent 13 years there and ultimately became the director of two schools. And so we opened up a second branch in California, then moved to the Virgin Islands. I really, really wanted to work with under-resourced, underserved students. And that was here. And so I moved in July of 2023. And so the idea when I moved here was I would open up another school. And so we were able to accomplish that. And so every single position that I've been in thus far, I've helped open additional schools for kids. It's really enjoyable for me. I love being able to put something in place, see it executed, and it be a benefit for the community. And that's certainly the case here. The school that I work in now is the only school in the Virgin Islands, the US Virgin Islands, that caters to kids with disabilities. And so, opening up a school on another island was important for that community. And so I'm proud of my work. I'm proud of what myself and all the folks that I've worked with have been able to accomplish. And I just love it. I mean, there's no other way to explain it. I just feel fulfilled by the work I'm doing.
So, from your vast experience, what do you see as the most critical gaps or challenges in classrooms today that need our immediate attention?
I don't think I'm going to say anything that anyone on this podcast is not heard before, but obviously we have so much shortage in qualified staff, and that's in the public system, in the private system, in our non-public schools. We're just seeing a dwindling of teaching and support staff, and so that's a big barrier to serving a student properly and appropriately. we have tons of strategies, tons of ways to support kids, but without people, staff to implement the strategies, it's really not going to work. And so we're in a big conundrum pulling people into our profession. I firmly believe if we had the number of people we actually need, we would be making a huge difference in the lives of many kids. Lots of districts in our country are not equipped with the people they need. So that's a big gap. I think that one of the other areas that I feel is really important is that we need to take a step away from sort of this traditional approach to educating students. And I even think that in a general education sense, kids need to move, kids need to be up, they need to be involved, they need to be social. And, sitting down at a desk and hearing the lecture and then following up with a worksheet is just not capturing everything that we could be doing to educate our kids. And it also doesn't prepare them. So I really feel like we need to take a step back, look at this sort of traditional response that we have and alter it. And we have to do that in the teacher training programs. Teachers need to be prepared for entering a classroom and being able to not just sit down at your desk, listen to the teacher and do your worksheet. They need to have also some training in compassionate care. I think all teachers go into the profession wanting to be or having this goal of supporting and helping kids. And over time, I think that can dwindle most likely because of the lack of support coming from the need of other staff. But having that compassionate approach, it goes such a long way in what you're trying to accomplish with goals and educating students. Much the same way we want our doctors or our healthcare folks to have the bedside manner, we need our teachers, the people that are educating and caring for our kids to also approach our kids in that way.
So, speaking of practical tools for educators, what are some specific actionable steps that educators could take tomorrow to improve classroom behavior and foster a more positive environment?
Really goes back to sort of what I just said. We need to slow down. We have in this country have such a focus on, achievement scores and testing and what that, and those results that we forget to slow down and get to know our kids and really build that rapport. And that's been one of my biggest, well, it's actually my dissertation. I did my dissertation on how kids respond to staff in specific situations. And hands down, that data showed that when you put care and show interest in students, they perform better. And I absolutely believe that. Slow it down, take time to get to know your students and be interested in what they're interested in, build that trust. And it goes a long way in terms of changing behavior. We can talk about all the strategies that are already out there and proven to be effective, but without that one component, those strategies are not going to be as effective as they could be. And so, I think in the public sector, that is often overlooked because of the pressure of meeting evaluations and assessment scores and all those things that the teachers have to work through. And I wish, again, that was part of a teacher preparation program.
Just kind of makes me think about favoritism and how if a student feels incredibly close with a specific teacher, they're just going to thrive in that environment. So I can really see what you're talking about as far as making those personal connections with
Right.
all students.
Right. Yep. And all, I do mean all students. In my previous schools in California, we spent a lot of time talking about that and talking about the importance of sort of reestablishing students' perception of school because the kids I was working with, that had been damaged. And so we had to spend quite a long time with not a focus on academics, but a focus on building that rapport and making the students feel safe and that they have trusting adults in place. And then we can start to tick away at where the academics may need to come into play.
So, prevention is often said to be the best strategy in behavior management. How
Mhm.
do proactive approaches help reduce classroom challenges? And what are some steps that teachers can take to create a more preventative culture?
Yeah. So because I'm a BCBA, I absolutely believe in antecedent management strategies. I think we should be aware of triggers and circumstances that could have the student begin to struggle. Obviously, as a teacher, you need to know that information. I also believe that we have to relax those sometimes so that the student experiences that particular situation and we are there to work them through it so that they have that skill set. I do believe in antecedent management, but I also believe that the kids should actually go through the events that are maybe making them feel, like they're struggling or challenged. I think the other big strategy is having communication and collaboration with the family and knowing what is going on in the home so that when a student arrives at school, you're prepared to receive them, that last night was an excellent night. We were successful. We went to bed, ate, did our homework. On the opposite side, we need to know when it's rough so that we can relax our expectations maybe that next day when we receive the student and they're just not in the best shape. And that is an opportunity to build rapport. The student knows that you are taking care of them, that I had a rough night and I come to school. Maybe I didn't want to, but my teacher is there and she is understanding and giving me some time to pull it together. And that may be all day. And we need to be flexible as educators around the emotional needs of kids if we want them to perform academically.
So, transitioning a little bit to students with IEPs and 504 plans, it seems like we need to tailor our behavioral interventions. How can teachers ensure that their classroom strategies are inclusive and effective for students with these unique needs?
Sure. They absolutely need to be individualized. And first off, they need to be followed, right? The individualization, sometimes you're putting things in place that may not be in place for another student. And so it's really, really important to talk to your group about why those things are happening. What we do for student A may be different than what we do with you and student B, but know that the end goal is the same. We're supporting you in the ways that you need to be supported. And I feel like over the course of my career, having those conversations with our students, it goes a long way. They are understanding, believe it or not, many things you're trying to do in class if you just talk to them about it. There are all kinds of strategies you can put in place, group contingencies, the good behavior game, all those things as a class-wide approach, and those are great. But there may need to be individualized plans in place, and the explanation of why those are in place goes a very long way.
That's incredibly just practical advice. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
How can our teachers collaborate with other school staff, such as counselors or specialists, to create consistent behavior supports?
Yeah, I know this is a tough area, especially in bigger settings, but it is so very important. I've had the luxury of having all those team members under one roof. It is so productive. It is so efficient. And I wish that happened more in these bigger public settings where everybody is approaching the student with the same sort of response because you're going to get further along if you're responding in the same way. And so the collaboration piece, it has to be a priority. They have to meet, send emails. And I would say that, unfortunately it falls on the teacher because the teacher is right there and wanting the help. But he or she would be responsible for sort of getting that going so that that collaborative back and forth can happen. I don't have any profound advice for that. The professionals have to want to do it. They have to want to meet and make that a priority so that the collaboration, the sharing of ideas and strategies can be had.
So, what do you think administrators can do to better support our teachers when they're struggling with classroom behavior issues?
Be there as a support. A lot of time I see and read a lot from teachers about how administrators are not there. And so that collaborative approach is important that the administrator is there because they're often the individuals that may be working with the child if they're disruptive in class and they need to, take a break or sort of reset. So they need to know those practical strategies for the individual child. And again, it's making time to do that, making sure that your staff feels supported. You're there, you're talking with them and asking them, how can I support you? What can I do to make this easier for you? We're not going to call an IEP and change placement because of these things. We want to work through them, and the administrator has to be there for the teachers to feel support.
So many educators feel overwhelmed by managing behavior alongside with all of our academic demands. What advice do you have for balancing that so that our teachers aren't being burned out?
I know I'm going to repeat myself so many times through this because I do think it comes back to the sort of things we've already talked about. To prevent burnout, you have to have people. And we know there's a shortage, they're understaffed. And so that burnout is going to happen much quicker when you don't have people there to support and help you. And it comes back to the number of personnel. I do also think that while it's easier said than done, these are kids and they can be fun. And if things are hard, take a step back and let's have some fun and then re engage. And again, going back to the rapport, learning the interests of the child and being able to offer that in those times. But burnout's real. I think we've all felt it. Having the support, having the number of people that you need and the professionals you need is the answer. I firmly believe that, but there are big barriers to making that happen.
What mistakes do you see educators make most often when addressing behavior, and how can we avoid them?
Well, the kids are our kids. We're talking about kids that are on IEPs, kids that are having struggles. We need to remember our expectations need to be appropriate for the individual student. And so having expectations beyond that is just going to lead to frustration on the teacher's part. So, yeah, I mean, people are going to make mistakes, and especially if they're new and young teachers, it is important to ask for help. It's important to pick your battles. We need to leave behind the things that are not going to really result in anything other than the teacher trying to make their point or have their point across. Avoiding getting into, you know, back and forth battles with our students sometimes is hard because you're trying to accomplish something and the student is also trying to accomplish something. You just sort of got to let that go sometimes and move on. I also think that teachers and staff should ask for help, tap out, take a break, remove yourself if you're feeling frustrated. And in fact, in my last schools, we all created sort of our crisis response and what we would do in the moment if we felt like we were, getting too emotionally involved in those situations. And it's basically like a 1 to 3 steps that you can do to sort of preserve your emotional output. And that's highly effective and it works when you practice it. Um, and one of those strategies is the tap out. And so you got to have folks around to be able to tap out if you're getting overwhelmed. And so again, back to the biggest barrier of all is personnel.
So, I have final question for you.
Okay.
If there's one mindset shift you'd encourage every teacher to adopt about behavior management, what would it be?
I don't know if I have one, but I have two, if that's okay.
All
Um,
right. Yeah. You.
it's really just to remember your love of teaching. I mean, you every most of us went into this field because we wanted to teach. We wanted to help our communities and work with kids. And I think sometimes if you've been in the profession a while, you forget like why you actually went into the profession. And so remembering, your love of teaching, your love of kids. And then the second thing would be kids aren't bad. You know, kids and labeling or thinking a kid is bad. And I've had people even say that is absolutely the wrong mindset. Kids make bad choices. And it is our job as teachers and educators to help them make better choices in the future.
That's very profound.
Well, it's the
Simple, but
truth.
very
It's the truth.
profound, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Uh,
Well, Dr. Miller, thank you so much for joining us today. It's clear that your work is transforming the lives of educators and students alike, and we're so grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from you.
it's my pleasure. Thank you.
To our listeners, we hope you found today's conversation as insightful and empowering as we did. Don't forget to subscribe to Innovating Education so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed this discussion, please leave us a review and share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, keep innovating education.